I made these mesh shell collecting bags for myself and my kids on our latest beach vacation. I loved filling them with beautiful shells and leaving the sand behind at the beach. To make this, you will need 4 6-inch by 9-inch pieces of fabric and 2 9-inch by 9-inch pieces of mesh. I used a package of double fold bias tape for the raw edges on the mesh and also for my drawstring. Next, you're going to take your ruler and mark a line 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. You'll do this on the other side as well, and then you'll repeat this with the other piece. Next, you're going to take your ruler and mark down 1 inch from the top and make a mark, and then mark a line 1.5 inch below the mark you just made. And you'll repeat this on the other side. Next, you're going to take your scissors and make a slit on each of the marks that we just made. You're only going to go into the 1/2 inch line that we marked earlier. So 2 slits, and repeat this with the other set of fabric. Next, fold back the flap that we just cut, and you will place a clip or pin, and we're going to take this to the machine and tack these flaps down. So you'll do this on all 4 pieces with each of the 2 flaps, so 8 flaps total. Next, you're going to place the pieces right sides together, and you're going to sew a seam down the 1/2 inch line on the sides of all of the pieces. After you sew it, it should look like this. These should be open, and next you're going to take the bottom and fold it back 1/2 inch and finger press. Repeat this on the other piece. You're going to take one of your pieces and turn it right side out. You can clip any of your loose threads that you have, and you're going to place this inside the piece that has the right side facing in. And now you're going to line up your side seams. I like to make sure that they match, and do this first. Place a clip or a pin, and then line up the other side seam in the same manner, and then place remaining clips or pins to hold in place. And next we're going to sew a top stitch all the way around to sew these 2 together. So on mine, I used 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now you're going to take this and flip it right side facing out, and you will tuck the lining piece down behind the outside piece. So you're basically folding it in half with the right side facing out, and then you'll need to roll the edges to make sure that the seam is all the way up at the top. I like to just pull it, use my fingers, push with my fingers, and then once I get it pretty well untucked, then I take it to my iron and give it a good press. So I press this with my iron, and now I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch all the way around. We're going to sew the channel that our drawstring is going to sit in, and where those flaps, the slits, were made, that is the channel that the drawstring is going to feed into. So I'm just taking my friction pen and marking a straight line to sew, and you will make a seam on either side of this flap. So you will sew this as a tube around your machine and create the channels for the drawstrings. Repeat this on your other piece. Now we sewed the channels for the drawstring, and the next step is to fold back under the flap. We're going to refold it along that crease we made earlier at the 1/2 inch mark. You will fold both pieces under 1/2 inch, and you can either finger press this or take it to your iron and give it a good press. Once you do this, you'll set this piece aside, and then it is on to making the mesh portion of the bag. We're going to sew the 2 mesh pieces together. I like to use clips, it's easier than the pins. Place your clips on 3 sides, and then you are going to take this to the machine and give it a seam 1/2 inch on all 3 sides. This part is optional, but I'm using a package of double fold bias tape to cover my raw edges of the mesh. I find that it reinforced the edges, so when it holds the weight carrying the shells, it is just a little bit reinforced. I open up the double fold bias tape so it is unfolded and line the raw edge of the bias tape to the raw edge of my mesh, and then I'm going to place pins in place to hold it until I sew. When I get to the corner, I just make a 90-degree turn and try to line up the folded edges as best as I can. The mesh shifted, so it's not perfectly square. It stretches a little bit, so just do the best you can. It's going to be on the inside of the shell bag. Just try to line these marks here at the corner. Here it is sewn with the bias tape. First, I'm going to turn this to the inside, as this will go on the inside of the mesh bag, and then we are going to sandwich the mesh in between the 2 layers of the top part of the bag. So just separate these layers here, and the inner part will go on the inside of the mesh, so that will go inside, and then the outer part will go over the top of the mesh. And I am going to place some pins to hold this in place, and then I will pull the top part down over the mesh and place some pins to hold it until we sew it. I sewed 2 rows of stitching here just to reinforce it a little bit for the weight of the shells. And then I cut 2 24-inch strips of the double fold bias tape, and I sewed them closed on both sides. I'm going to take a safety pin and feed the bias tape through the channel we made for the drawstring, and I will start on one side of the opening, feed it all the way around, and come out the same side that I started. Just make sure that there aren't any twists in the bias tape, and then line up the raw edges overlapping about 1 inch, And then I'm going to sew a square to hold them closed, and I'm going to use a clip in place just until I'm ready to sew. Now I'm going to feed the drawstring for the other side. I'm using the safety pin again to help feed it through. When you get to the side, just try to scooch the bias tape over out of the way and keep going. And then once you get that opening, just pull it gently. Make sure there aren't any twists in this bias tape, and then we are going to overlap them again about an inch and sew them closed. Here's the rectangle I sewed to close the bias tape, and you can just feed that into the bag so it is somewhere tucked in where you can't see it. And then you fill it with your shells, and when you're ready to close it up, just pull the 2 tabs to close it. I love this mesh beach bag. I love that I can pick my shells and the sand stays at the beach.